In my work in landscaping, sometimes a customer will ask me the question, how can I make a low-impact landscape? Now, I love getting this question, not because it might lead to a fun project, but because it gives me a chance to turn that question on its head. So often, the talk about environmental issues just assumes that everything we humans do is bad. We just mess everything up. But I think we're really missing something when we only focus on doing less bad. There's a lot of good things that actually need to happen to sustain life on this planet. What about making a high-impact landscape in a good way? There's a new term that you may or may not be familiar with, and it's called regenerative. It's been used a lot in agriculture, where a lot of farmers are coming up with pretty incredible ways of growing food while at the same time building their soil and restoring their ecology. But people are starting to use this word in home landscaping also. Now, there's not an agreed upon standard for how to make a regenerative landscape, but I think of it as a yard that participates in the ecosystem and helps heal the ecosystem by doing some of the good work that's needed to sustain life on this planet. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about how that works. There's a few basic things that we need to live on this planet. An electric car, a smartphone, and a good grocery delivery service. Okay, maybe that's not it. So in our abundantly wealthy society, we, myself included, tend to take for granted the fact that we need clean air, clean water, food, and a place to live that doesn't have too extreme weather. And the earth has always provided these things for us. But today, these are the things that are being threatened. So I want to show an example of a place where the ecosystem has not been cared for. In Rajasthan, India, which is a pretty dry climate, for much of the last half of the 20th century, traditional practices of letting rainwater soak into the ground were abandoned, to where when rain fell, it would tend to just run off and not do any good. At the same time, wells were being overpumped to water crops and new modern farming methods. It got to the point where the water cycle, which is crucial to the ecosystem, broke, and a bunch of rivers dried up, and countless wells were without water. So picture poor farmers unable to feed their families, people migrating to the cities to try to find work, women and girls walking for miles every day carrying fresh water. But I picked this example because this story actually has a good ending. Inspired by a man named Regenerative, who's now known as the Waterman of India, hundreds of villages started working together to regenerate their ecosystem. They started by bringing back the old practices of helping rainwater, soak into the ground. And since the first village started doing this in the 1980s, they have brought 7 dry rivers and 250,000 dry wells back to life. That's pretty amazing. Farmers are now able to make a living. Displaced people have returned home to be reunited with their families. 15 times more girls go to school because they're not spending hours carrying water every day. This is actually only one of many incredible stories of ecological regeneration. For some reason, they're not on the top of our news feeds, but they should be. So I encourage you to seek these out as an antidote to all the bad news that we're constantly being fed. But that's a long way away. What about here at home? I think we can be part of this same regenerative work, even in our own little yards. Our ecosystem might not be quite as broken as in Rajasthan, but we still need to maintain and build and rebuild the building blocks, some of which are shakier here. Even in our little yards, we can do some of this work. So I'd like to talk about some ways we can do this here at home. I take a lot of inspiration from the work of Douglas Tallamy. He's an entomologist, a bug scientist, and he's done a lot of groundbreaking work into the importance of insects to the life on the planet. As it turns out, insects, and especially caterpillars, are one of the main ways that food gets spread around the food chain. You know how a plant takes energy from the sun, and a caterpillar eats a leaf, and then somebody eats the caterpillar, and so on and so on. It's not just some abstract scientific idea. This is how life works. One of the examples that Tallamy gives is that in order for a pair of chickadees to raise a hatch of babies, they have to find more than 6,000 caterpillars. I didn't even know there were 6,000 caterpillars in the city of Corvallis. And then there's pollinators. Most plants on the planet are pollinated by insects, not just honeybees, but thousands of kinds of insects. Plants would not survive without this important building block of the ecosystem. A lot of these pollinators are threatened with extinction today. One of the reasons for this is that they don't have as much to eat as they used to. A lot of them have very specialized relationships with native plants, and there just aren't as many of these around. One local example is the Fender's blue butterfly. Now, this butterfly only lives here in the Willamette Valley, and it will pollinate several different kinds of plants, but it only likes to lay its eggs on one kind of plant called the Kincaid's lupin. Now, a number of decades ago, the land that this lupin grew on was developed to the point that there were very few left, and the butterfly was actually thought to be extinct for a number of years. But here's another good ending. The Fender's blue was rediscovered and has been making a pretty amazing recovery thanks to some pretty serious habitat restoration projects, including homeowners planting these lupins on their land. So this has been a lot of talk about ecology already, and it's a lot to take in. It can be kind of overwhelming. I find my landscaping customers are also pretty overwhelmed with their lives, dealing with work and taxes and insurance and all the things we have to fill our lives with. And so I've tried to simplify the idea. The easiest way to make a regenerative landscape is 3 words: plant more plants. Okay, so how does this work? What do plants do for us? Well, for starters, they do most of the basic ecological work that's needed for life on this planet, including something that's pretty mind-blowing. You might have even learned about it in 9th grade science class. It's called photosynthesis. Seriously, if you came from another planet where they didn't have photosynthesis, you'd be jealous. Plants take the sun's energy and turn it into just about every living thing on Earth. They take carbon dioxide from the air, give us oxygen to breathe. They use some of the carbon to grow, which feeds us and those 6,000 caterpillars. Plants also build soil, not only by dropping bits of dead plants and leaves onto the ground, but they also do something amazing with some of the carbon they take from the air. They turn it into a liquid sugar and inject it from their roots into the ground. They do this to feed soil life and soil biology, and a lot of this turns into organic matter in the soil. Now, those of you who are gardeners understand the importance of organic matter. It's the basis of soil health, and it makes your plants grow better. But have you thought about where organic matter comes from? Plants. So if you get a truckload of compost to put on your soil, that's fantastic. But it's also somebody else's photosynthesis. And so what about getting some more going on in your own yard? Another great thing plants do for us is temperature regulation. So in landscaping these days, it's kind of popular to fill large spaces with gravel and almost no plants. Now I understand why people do this because it seems really simple and it looks kind of cool in a Zen sort of way if it's done well. But I've been going around with a thermometer to see what happens on landscapes like this. On a 95-degree day, that's hot, but not all that unusual. The temperature on the surface of one of these rockscapes will read between 125 and 140 degrees. Yeah. Well, maybe 10 feet away under the shade of a tree, it'll be 35 to 50 degrees cooler. Plants are a miracle that we tend to take for granted. And we can be grateful for this and take part in this miracle simply by planting more plants. Now, the plant more plants idea is a great place to start, but people who have thought about this more might understandably criticize it as being a little bit too simple. So you can give your yard a focus to take it to the next level. I've already talked about pollinator gardens. You could also do an edible landscape and share some food with your neighbors, or a wildlife garden, or a carbon garden. Speaking of which, if you increase your soil organic matter levels by 1% in a typical small city yard, you'll be adding a ton or more of carbon to your soil. That's carbon that's not in the atmosphere. Some people are also building what are called water retention landscapes. Organic matter also stores water. If you increase your organic matter that same 1%, you could be adding to that same small city yard, you could be adding up to 2,800 gallons of water in the soil, ready to water your plants in those dry summer months. So at this point, you might be wondering what a regenerative landscape looks like. Is it wildly different from your landscape? Well, I have a couple examples. The first here was designed by Owen Dell and Associates. It's in Southwest Corvallis, and it fits because it's simply loaded with plants. But it doesn't look all that different from a normal landscape. It just has more plants. And the next example is at the Methodist Church just down the street from here. And this was designed by Bill Probsting. And it's a great example of taking it to the next level by focusing on native plants that feed and shelter pollinators. So great work, guys. Now, I've given you lots of ecological reasons to do a regenerative landscape, but there's actually some other benefits for you. If you fill your yard completely with plants, a very dense planting, it can actually save you work and time if it's done right. For one thing, a bunch of the weeds will get smothered out, and you don't have to put as much mulch down because the soil will already be covered with a living mulch that's doing a lot of good work for you. Now, I do have to say that the design and plant choices make a huge difference as to how easy it is to take care of these. This talk is too short to be a how-to. I'm just trying to inspire you to do this. So please get lots of help, do lots of research and planning. There are a lot of tricks you can use, like planting small to medium-sized shrubs that have really densely packed leaves that will help smother out weeds. Now, if you're still not convinced that regenerative landscaping is for you, I have one more reason. Our country has unprecedented material wealth, but we still score among the highest when it comes to anxiety and stress. Well, there's actually lots of studies that show that gardening reduces stress and anxiety. And on top of that, in 2007, scientists discovered that a very common soil bacteria produces an antidepressant chemical, one that's shown good results in human studies. So are you starting to see what regenerative landscaping is about? It's not a new technology or some grand new technique. This is a mindset shift. we don't have to be bystanders. We can actively take part in the miracle of life. Even if we don't have a yard to do it, you can plant a plant in a pot on your apartment balcony. We can all do this. So let's go get our hands in the dirt, get happy, and plant more plants.